Do you remember what your life was like 2 years ago today? If not, please allow me to set the scene. Trump is the president. There's a rocket pack on the economy. We're energy independent. A gallon of gas costs around $2 on average. There's 10 miles of border wall going up each week. You can freely travel anywhere in the country without much hassle or inconvenience, except from the TSA. The idea of people getting into fist fights over someone not wearing a surgical mask at the beach, or of being required to show your identity papers in order to attend a minor league hockey game, things like that are so laughably inconceivable, they would never even enter into your thinking. And you know what the best part of this world is? You have never heard of Dr. Anthony Fauci. You have no reason to care who the head of the National Institute of Allergies and Infectious Diseases is, or that his direct superior is Dr. Francis Collins at the National Institutes of Health, or that his, Fauci's salary, all $420,000 of it, makes him the most handsomely well-compensated employee in the entire federal bureaucracy. You have no reason to care that these two ridiculous geriatric buffoons have been sending your tax dollars over to the Chinese communists to help them build a bioweapon that, if it were to become airborne, would cause the deaths of millions the world over. But that's only because you don't know about it yet. If you did know about it, then you might say, how about let's not help our hostile geopolitical adversary build a doomsday bioweapon, and while we're at it, let's go back even a little bit further in time, and let's say, how about let's not give Communist China a special dispensation to build a biosecurity level 4 facility? Because hypothetically, if we were going to help Communist China build a doomsday bioweapon, and we had a vested interest in that bioweapon not being unleashed on the entire planet, wouldn't we want them doing it in a facility that they didn't need a special dispensation in order to build? I ain't no fancy scientist or nothing. I ain't got no fancy book learning, but I feel like these are pretty screamingly obvious questions that it might have behooved our top infectious disease experts to be asking before they embarked down this particular river of death in this particular canoe. So fast forward to today, to the actual world in which we are all so blessed to live and work in. Anthony Fauci is one of the world's foremost media superstars, and look, you can call me jingoistic all you want, but seriously, I won't tolerate any pinko bastard saying this country is not a great country, when only in America you can help the country's enemies build a doomsday bioweapon that massacres over 500,000 of your own people, and then you can botch the government response every which way a thing can be botched. You can be wrong about literally 100% of your public pronouncements, and yet none of that will stand in the way of you, one, keeping your job as long as you want to keep it, and number two, using these events which arose out of your own malevolence and stupidity, as a springboard to multimedia superstardom, book deals, Disney documentaries, the whole thing. When you can fail upward all the way to being a national institution, even an object of religious devotion, I shall be damned if I permit any rapacious rapscallion rascal to allege that this isn't the greatest country of all countries. Oh, you know who else didn't have any idea that Fauci and Collins were up to any of this reckless malfeasance and misappropriation of public funds? The Congress. And it looks like they're none too happy about it, as well they shouldn't be. But more on that in the main segment. And Jim Eagle, I was listening to the president's speech yesterday, and when he pulled out the Jim Crow 2.0 card, I thought the chances were good that he was going to revisit the line in which he gave you your name, when he said, "This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle." But alas, he did not. I was really pulling for you too, buddy. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where memeing yourself is punishable by 4 nights in the dungeon and an entire lifetime of being mocked on Reddit and 4chan. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I am your eponymous host and humble servant. And you may have noticed, as I alluded to in the open, that Tony Fauci was back on Capitol Hill yesterday, testifying in front of the Senate Oversight Committee, which means we got another 5-minute episode of the most entertaining program on television, the Rand Paul versus Tony Fauci steel cage barbed wire death match. Now featuring chainsaws, which with Fauci at this point, I feel like we're watching a man who's just starting to realize and possibly come to grips with the fact that, well, maybe there is a downside to being a gigantic multimedia superstar, because people say bad things about you on the internet. I, Dr. Anthony Fauci, selfless public servant, the living personification of science itself. People on the internet are saying I should be fired, and it's all the fault of Senator Rand Paul. Frankly, Rand Paul didn't need to do all that much here, except to give Fauci a sufficiently long length of rope with which to politically strangle himself, because I was really taken aback by his performance yesterday. I feel like we've passed the point now where we're watching a man's slow, inexorable descent into madness, and if that wasn't self-evident before Fauci, using visual aids for the first time, angrily produced a series of printed out screen grabs from Rand Paul's campaign website where it's a big picture of Fauci, and the text says, I forget exactly what it says, but it's something to the effect of, "Do you want Dr. Fauci fired? If so, donate now." The idea that Fauci thinks this is somehow politically improper or ethically not above board, that tells us two things. One, Democrats really hate it when the other side plays ball the same way they do. And number two, Tony Fauci is a cloistered, blinded member of the ruling elite plutocracy, and he doesn't have the faintest idea how politics work in the real world. Well, yes, I have tried very hard every day these past 2 years to grow my media profile to being as massive as possible, but who the hell are these stupid redneck rubes out in flyover country who think they're allowed to call for my firing just because I work for them? It's an outrage! I demand action! He must have been able to tell at this point by the looks on the senators' faces that this line of attack wasn't really hitting home, so he immediately pivoted right to the tried and true rhetorical gambit used by every leftist moron who doesn't want to answer a hard question. You guessed it, he went to the "I'm getting death threats" card for, as we well know, whether it's in real life or on the interwebs, if you pull out the "I'm getting death threats" card, it means the argument is over, you win, Bob's your uncle, that's it. But I got 4 words for Tony Fauci. Show me the receipts, asshole. Okay, I guess that's 5 words, but it's the same thing that I've said to AOC, Swalwell, Maxine Waters, all the intellectual all-stars of the Democrat Party. When you suddenly blurt out, "I'm getting death threats" each time the argument doesn't go your way, it has the effect that I do not believe you. I think you are lying. And if you want to prove me wrong, then show me the damn receipts. Because first of all, getting death threats on the internet, it doesn't make you special or important, and it doesn't make your critics wrong. Every person who has any sort of public notoriety level of which to speak gets death threats, but most of them don't feel the need to use that fact as a rhetorical device. It's just an unfortunate fact about the world. Personally, I've been arguing with people on the internet for 25 years now. You think I never got a death threat? Please! But even still, I'm willing to give Fauci the benefit of the doubt. If he has received some such threat or series of threats that he regards as so heinous that it needs to be remarked about publicly during testimony in the Senate Oversight Committee, then here comes a wild idea out of left field. How about instead of printing out screen grabs from Rand Paul's fundraising page and memeing yourself, how about you print out the death threats instead? Show me the damn receipts, because frankly, Tony Fauci, you are not a man who's currently in a position where people are overcome with the inclination to take your word for anything. When you say a thing, we have 2 years' worth of empirical evidence now to suggest there is close to a 100% likelihood that the thing you're saying is false. Oh, have I hit too close to home with that one? Is that a sore subject? I only ask because when Senator Paul asked the question, "Why should anyone believe you when you've been so wrong about everything?" instead of being a man, instead of acknowledging before the American people that you've been either lying or mistaken on pretty much every aspect of this thing, you opted instead to engage in the bureaucratic arts of blame shifting and ass covering. You sat there and blamed all of your own words on the CDC. Well, all I was ever doing was making statements in support of the CDC guidance and recommendations, so clearly none of the mistakes are actually my fault. Remember, this is the same man who a couple weeks ago was non-ironically referring to himself as the personification, the human avatar of the scientific method itself. My name is Tony Fauci, and I am science made incarnate in the flesh. This guy is probably the biggest political liability that Joe Biden has right now. And Joe Biden can't afford a whole lot of political liabilities when he's 20 plus points underwater on his job approval before the end of his first year. But Joe Biden is also no stranger to making stupid remarks that have the potential to cause him nothing but harm politically. So of course he is on the record as saying multiple times that there's nothing that could ever happen that would cause Dr. Fauci to be relieved of his duties. And I'm telling you right now, we are past the point where this man is a political liability. If there was any doubt on that score, this hearing yesterday ought to have dispelled it. Cutting bait on Fauci might be the only thing Biden could even do right now to arrest the rate of decline in his approval numbers, though it certainly wouldn't reverse it. Things are just going to get worse for Fauci from here on out, since it seems pretty clear that there's a whistleblower somewhere, either in the NIH or the NIAID, because this latest Fauci email dump from Project Veritas, it's the third such dump in the past several months, and there's no reason to suspect we've heard the worst of what's in there. In this latest dump, there is an exchange wherein Collins and Fauci are discussing how to use the fake news media to attack and destroy and discredit some epidemiologists who had written an op-ed that highlighted how the government's COVID response was non-data driven and pretty much completely divorced from honest scientific inquiry. One of the guys was from Harvard, one guy from Oxford, one guy from Stanford, so Collins and Fauci called up their buddies in the news media and arranged it for these three scientists to be smeared as fringe wackos and conspiracy theorists and the usual thing that they do, because that's how the scientific method works, right? If someone questions your findings, you attack his character and impugn his professional reputation and try to wreck his life. So much science! It makes my little layman head spin. And how did Fauci try to weasel his way out of it when Senator Paul confronted him with the email transcript? Well, Senator Paul, that email that you're referring to, that was actually from Dr. Collins to me, so those are not my words. Oh, that's what you're going with, huh? Those aren't my words. All I did was say, yes, that's a great idea. We should do that. Okay, pal. I can't wait to see how well you respond to the next scandalous dump of incriminating emails, since you've done such a great job with the last three. But Tony Fauci wasn't the only emissary of the deep state who had a rough day on Capitol Hill yesterday, because elsewhere in the building, in a different committee hearing, the FBI leadership had huddled together and decided, yeah, this one's not looking too good for us. Maybe we better send a sacrificial lamb out there to take the hit so that none of us in senior leadership has to come off looking like a lying psychopath. And so it comes to pass that in a setting where you would expect the FBI director to appear personally, or barring that, at least the deputy director, whom did we get instead? We got the executive deputy director. And remember, curmudgeon's first law of bureaucracy, which states that the more modifiers your job title has in it, the more irrelevant you are. They sent out the executive deputy director, so that's 2 modifiers, which means they stopped short of sending out a 3 modifier sacrificial lamb. So at least we didn't get a deputy assistant undersecretary, but this is pretty close to that, really. Now, a lot of people on the right were pissed off at Ted Cruz for that stupid thing he said last week about January 6th being a violent terrorist attack, which I mentioned it briefly the other day, but I didn't think it was that big a deal, and I certainly didn't think it was just cause for voting the man off of conservative island. And he reminded us yesterday why he is so valuable in the spot that he currently occupies, because he calmly sliced this poor executive deputy director into so much rhetorical mincemeat. And crucially, he forced her to refuse answering these 3 questions. Number 1, did any FBI agents or informants incite criminality on January 6th? Number 2, were any FBI agents or informants present at the Capitol on January 6th? Number 3, did any FBI agent or informant commit a violent crime on January 6th? If the FBI was on the level, if they were just in the business of law enforcement and not in the business of shady false flaggery, if their agency had no involvement with creating the series of events that happened that day, then why is the executive deputy director refusing to answer those questions? Shouldn't those questions all be a slam dunk? Nope, absolutely not. Nuh-uh, we are the FBI, we don't do crap like that. Isn't that what the answer should be? When the answer is not that, don't we have reasonable cause for concern regarding what this agency is up to? When the answer is, I'm sorry, I can't reveal sources and methods, don't I have a right to be pretty freaking horrified by that response? I can tell why they didn't want to send the director out or the assistant director. My first gut reaction to January 6th, and I said this in the video I did the same day it happened, was that something about it felt artificial and stage managed. Like the whole purpose of the thing was to generate just the kind of footage that wound up being generated. And I would love to be able to say that something has happened in the intervening months to make me reevaluate that initial skepticism, but it hasn't. If anything, I'm more suspicious today than I was a year and 6 days ago. From where we sit right now, it feels like the Democrats and the deep state and the fake news media are all trying desperately to keep a lid on the facts of what really happened, which they have to do because they've chosen to make January 6th the cornerstone of their whole election year narrative. So they have to keep the cover-up in place all the way from now until November. And the pitch is, sure, we've done a terrible job, and everything is much worse now than it was before, but if you don't keep us in power, then the insurrectionists will win. Every day will be January 6th. Which brings us neatly along to this speech the president gave in Georgia yesterday. And if you didn't know going in what the desired effect of this thing was, you didn't even need to hear any of the barely intelligible words that President Corpsey Cadaverton mumbled out. All you had to do was look at the crowd of people that they had arrayed behind him. There were probably, let's say, 25 people visible in the camera frame. For at least 22 of them, let's just say there's no reason to suspect there are any crackers in the woodpile. I don't have the slightest bit of doubt that the White House comms team actually combed through the crowd and selected people for on-camera roles based on their skin tone. But we cannot forget about inclusion and diversity, because diversity is everything. But no, of course not. Don't be crazy. We can't put any actual white people up there. But let's maybe stick a couple of light-skinned blacks up in the top left corner. No, of course I didn't say mulattoes. You're not allowed to say that word. That's racist. I just want a couple of black people who could possibly pass for white. But not without some effort. It would take maybe a makeover and a new wardrobe and a lot of commitment. Now, come on, we've got 2,000 people out there. There must be 2 of them who fit my weirdly specific parameters for the type of people I want in my top left corner. Now go find them! But it sure does make for a weird visual once you get the shot fully composed and populated. Joe Biden has always been one of the pastier representatives of the Caucasoid race, but now that he's 817 years old and in the advanced state of slow creeping death, he is pretty much the whitest man who ever existed. So when you stick this whiter-than-white man in front of a crowd of nothing but very, very black people, it has the effect that you feel like you're watching a high school graduation ceremony from apartheid-era South Africa, where the white principal is handing out diplomas to all of the black students. And regarding the contents of the address, I have a question for Biden and his puppet masters. Sorry, I mean speechwriters. How many people in the United States in the 3rd decade of the 21st century recognize names like Bull Connor and Jefferson Davis? If you asked 100 random Americans on the street to affix identities to those names, how many do you suppose would get either one right? Oh yeah, Bull Connor, I know him. He's my favorite pro wrestler, dude. Jefferson Davis, didn't he used to play cornerback for the Raiders? Is he still on the injured reserve? Anyway, that was the general thrust of Joe's speech. It was, sure, I am probably the worst president in the history of the country, and sure, I've said more offensive things about black people than basically all living Republicans combined, but that's not important now. You have to keep voting for my party, even though our policies make your life a living hell, because the other guys are even more racist than we are. Bull Connor, Jefferson Davis, Build Back Better, Corn Pop, I'm out! And that's just about all the abuse I can heap on these people for one night. Not that I've run out, I just have to be in bed at a reasonable hour, so we'll pick this back up on Friday. Thanks for watching. Have a pleasant tomorrow. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.